Hello, everyone. This meeting is going to be in English because we have guests that's English speaking. So very much welcome to 30 med HS30. Today we're doing a quite radical circularity jump. Instead of building new houses, we move them. We have Tony here, associate professor of architecture school of Umeå, and she's going to tell us a bit more about this technique and the possibilities with that technique and how that could help companies and municipalities to reduce the climate impacts in the end, and also maybe save some culture within our country. And so let's move into this 30 minutes about moving houses, not building new ones. Welcome, Tonya.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for bearing with me and allowing the English in this session. I'm not very good at speaking Swedish, but I'm learning a little bit. So yes, welcome. And just to say that this morning I will speak for probably about 15 minutes, maybe a bit longer, and I have focused on the economic benefits of house moving. That's not to say that's necessarily my driver in this, but it's certainly been the contractor's driver, and that's always there as a reminder. So I will focus on the economic benefits. As I say, I am working with a collaborative team. We have been based in Umeå. We still have a research group there, and I'm also based at the University of the West of England in the UK, with the idea that although Sweden is at the forefront of this, I believe that it should extend out beyond. So just to say a little bit about who we are and what the background context is, I have established a research studio. It's called Houseflow, and we're currently exhibiting, or I'm currently exhibiting at the Copenhagen Architecture Biennial. And the exhibition was selected from hundreds that were submitted, and I'm very pleased about it, but I'm saying it here in this context really to say that sometimes the idea of house moving is seen in Sweden as a historic model. But it's proposed here, of course, through the biennial, that it is it's a future possibility, and that's what I want to propose really. So the research group is a collaborative project. It's working with academics, with Swedish architects, and also with a house moving contractor. So we've been developing this since 2021. And we've been working with mainly Magnus Martinsson from near HS30 Husflyttningar, who, as you know, is in the north of Sweden. But I want to stress also and emphasize that the houses that this one contractor has moved cover the whole of Sweden. So he's moved housing in near Malmo even, but also near Stockholm. So the project that I've been working on has been to plot and archive this one contractor's moves. We understand that it's in excess of 400. This is over a 30-year period, but we believe that it is somewhere between 400 and 1,000 moved buildings. And we've plotted in quite a lot of detail, 279 of them, I think, so far. So we're moving now much faster towards the 400. And the purpose of this has been to collect data to make a public access database. So once this is released, we're hoping that people will be able to add to it and put their stories of buildings that have been moved. So we're hoping that it will come into a wider consciousness, wider understanding in Sweden and beyond. And of course, as you're all aware, it's at a moment after the Kiruna church move that everybody is a little bit more aware of Sweden's role in moving buildings. So this is one layer of a map that we hope is quite dense. It will be digital and will be publicly accessible. And we're also developing a moving exhibition about the practice, which we hope will go from Kiruna through Turku, Luleå, Umeå, Stockholm, Malmo, and Copenhagen. And we also have 3 venues across Europe at the moment, and I'm hoping to build on those. One is in Tiel in the Netherlands. One is at London South Bank University. We have an exhibition space there. And the other one is at the University of the West of England in Bristol. So it's an idea of raising this public consciousness towards a future. And just to ask some basic questions and focus again on this idea of the economies around it. Why move? Why now? So one reason is that demolition, as you know, I'm sure you're all aware of some of these factors, but it's bringing it in really to this idea of house moving. The idea that demolition is increasingly costly. New buildings and material costs are rising beyond expectation through various rationale and reasons for this, but we can talk about that also. I'm hoping there's plenty of time for questions at the end. The idea that extraction of virgin materials is costly and sparse and increasingly so. So it's not so easy to find materials of the same quality that we've been using historically. The elimination of waste and hazardous materials or hazards associated with its disposal are also really costly. And this includes the elimination of toxic material, debris, dust, and considerations of employee safety that go along hand in hand with this. So as I've already said, but I just want to keep looping it round, I believe that it's the future. It's on the cusp of the past. I think it's in decline. Certainly the practices that this particular house mover has been using are in decline, but I would argue that it could be a future in relation to ideas of sustainability. And I think it's important now because of increasing climate instabilities, of flood, subsidence, and other factors really to do with both climate and to do with shifting global economic and political circumstances. So in terms of Sweden and why Sweden, I think, Sweden has this significant housing stock that is empty and disregarded because of its location. This is just a map at a distance, really, of the ones that we've been plotting. But we've come to understand that there are many empty properties, particularly in the north and inland, that could be relocated. And there are also locations where housing is about to be discarded or destroyed. One example is the recently publicized 6,000 homes that are being lost in Kiruna. So what to do with these homes? Is it possible to move them is one question. Sweden is at the forefront of moving buildings, and this has been a significant replanning. So one of the arguments of my research has been this has been a significant replanning that's happened from the ground up, really, with individuals making a decision to move buildings. And I say individuals, it might be municipalities as well. And it's not really been documented. This is the first time that it's going to be documented fully. As I've mentioned, this idea of global economic shifts and crises are in abundance, and this is having a rapid and increasing impact on the cost of construction. So how to mitigate against that? And I think it's an idea of providing economic resilience. So house moving is less complex than new build. It's more singular. The resources required for it are more singular. It covers fuel costs and lorries and so on. But it is quite restrained compared to new build projects. So the amount of materials and so on that are required. So the idea that material and labor costs of production can almost be eliminated if a house is moved is something to really take on board. And again, this seems to be in some way stating the obvious, but it's really important to start to think about it in economic terms. Local municipalities are extending and developing their circular economies in construction. And one of the arguments of this research has really been that house moving should really be part of this. So a more total and a more ambitious approach to the circular economy. So when seeking CO2 grants, the potential of house moving is really significant. And I just wanted to give one example of a house demolished by Umeå municipality. This was demolished in 2024. And to say that it could have been moved easily and the estimated cost of removing it, of course, this does depend on distance. This is a local move estimation, would have been 50,000 euros. As it turns out, the house was not saved. And instead, the circular economy was used to just take elements from the house, minimum elements, actually. So one of the arguments, again, of the research is that the circular economy is currently operating at quite a superficial level, and it needs to think bigger. I've got a whole set of misconceptions that I'd like to dispel, as I find during the research that these same misconceptions come up again and again, both within Sweden, but also beyond. So although Sweden is a forerunner in this, this is, of course, happening in other parts of the world. It's happening in North America. It's happening in New Zealand, Australia, and one or two other places. But I see that in Europe, particularly, Sweden could drive this. So there's a set of questions or queries about misconceptions that I'd like to dispel. So the first is that the building needs to have been designed to move or to be lightweight. So I'm quite often, when I speak in the UK, particularly about it, it's because Sweden builds in a particular way using timber. But no. So just looking at this one housing contractor, all buildings have the capacity to move, regardless of their material construction. And that's something that I've had to adjust my thinking to as well, having worked in architecture in practice and as an academic. So I've seen examples of brick, concrete and stone, up to 300-ton single houses being moved. And then I saw, or I understand, a project that the contractor has moved 8 houses, each of which were between 200 and 300 tons in one single development move. So just to put that in the context, again, of the church move in Kiruna, that was 650 tons. And you can see here an image on the right, which is a timber house. The one on the left is a concrete substation, so very heavy, but 650 tons in one move. So that's the weight of these. The building can only be single story and not too tall. That's another common misconception. No, a single contractor, this same one, has moved 3- and 4-story buildings. He's moved them wholesale, but he's also cut them into sections, both horizontally and vertically, to fit onto the trucks, and then reconnected the sections. So, as I say, one of them has been as heavy as the Kiruna Church, and you can see here on the right an image of a 2-story cutaway. So the roof has been taken off, and quite often this is done to maybe go through under bridges. So if it has to be moved a significant distance and come across bridges, the roof can be cut off. The other one to show here is this 3-story concrete basement apartments in Umeå. So you can see that there's a weight and a depth of these kind of buildings. Another 2-story housing project moved in 2 sections, and the steels that we used to move it were retained for new balcony projections on the rear of the building. So you can see here the house is sliced horizontally. And you can also begin to think about ideas that it can fit into narrow spaces. So this is the concrete basement housing that I was speaking about, between 200 and 300 tons each house. So with a total weight really of in excess of 1,600 tons. Oops, sorry. And again, to make that comparison with the Kiruna Church. So on the right-hand side, you can see the image, which looks like a lightweight timber construction, but you can see on the left that it was moved with this very weighty concrete substructure. So 8 of these houses were moved in Malmberget. The building needs to have a particular type of foundation. No, the contractor cuts the building from the basements and positions them onto new basements or concrete rafts or footings, and can reuse the stone for this. So I've seen 2 projects. So some of the projects I've filmed and photographed in detail, and I've seen 2 projects that have reused stone, so moved a building and then bought the stone separately and reinserted it as foundations. This one in Strixley was a house that was moved only 15 meters onto a new basement. The image on the left, you can see it's being moved across onto this new basement that's been built. And in this case, it was in the context of swamp, which is in English is rising damp. So it's responding to problems of the basement and rebuilding a new basement for the house. There's a query often about how long this might take, with an idea that moving a building might take many months, but no, a large-scale move can be completed in a matter of a couple of weeks. The main duration has sometimes been about waiting for permits. So this might be to do with operations of closing roads and so on, but it can be quite speedy as it's moved. And I've shown these 2 examples in particular because you can see these are brick houses. So both of these examples are not lightweight constructions. They have concrete footings and brickwork also. This idea that I've mentioned before, that housing in narrow or tight areas cannot be moved and need expensive cranes to move. I think a lot of people, if you've seen moving buildings, it may have been using a crane solution, but this is not using the crane. This is using timber, stacking, and steel beams. And the advantages of using this method are that houses can be moved in very tight spaces without cranes, and they can also be cut to move across bridges and more. So the contractor has built snow and ice roads and has moved buildings across the sea. So just to show these, so the images on the right-hand side here it says that he's been moving houses in Pitio between 2024 and 26. That implies it's a long duration of moving, but they're just different projects, different parts of the housing. The one that you can see in the center was moved in the past few weeks. It was moved forward out of its site. So they're historic houses in a very narrow area that you can see on the right. It was moved forward. A new foundation was built because it was sinking into the ground and repositioned in a straight position. The other one is a log house specialist move in Robertsfors. So again, a house or a building that you might conceive of as being dismantled to be moved was moved wholesale. So quite a weighty structure. Three other ideas that people often raise. You can't move a building far, but you can move it hundreds of kilometers. And one of the examples that has been made into a TV documentary actually about this particular house mover, you can move it hundreds of kilometers. So he moved that one for 300 kilometers. There's an idea about it being prohibitively expensive. The contractor is always clear that cost comes first, and so it depends on land costs and distance as well as the building. And he will only move if it's profitable to undertake it. So you can see now we have all of these examples of profitable circumstances. One example that I witnessed in Umeå was this removal of a historic house out of the city, so moving from Umeå to Degernes. And it released some land beneath the house, and the value of the land meant that this house could be preserved and could be moved out of the city, and the owner would then have sufficient funds to refurbish the house and upgrade it for living. And then another common misconception, there's no point in moving an old house because it's not up to modern standards. Of course, they can be refurbished at lower cost, increase insulation, reduce heat loss, and make efficiencies, of course. And it's really important to note that the timber qualities, particularly in Sweden, are often significantly better in older houses. The slower growing timber and just the craftsmanship that's required for these, apart from the fact that, there's an idea about heritage and retaining heritage, means that the quality of materials is much greater. So just to wrap it up, really, just to say that there's a company that I've been looking at called the Nickel Brothers, who are working out of Washington State, and they have a strategy for moving houses. They take houses that are available and store them on site. So you can go onto their site, you can buy a house from their site, and you can reposition it. So one idea that we had was that this could start to happen in Sweden, where, say, for instance, Kiruna might be a good example, that these homes could be collected, stored, and then wait there until people want to come and buy them. So just to wrap it up, but also really I've just made a few notes about why else you might think about this. And I put a quote in here from Buckminster Fuller, who was the architect who designed the Dymaxion house in the 1920s. So the idea of the future of the house and thinking about the future of housing. A quote from him that I think most architecture students are taught in their first year: ask not how much your building costs, but how much it weighs. This is really an idea about the weight of a building and how it is to move it. So just to kind of bring that back into being, really. And to think also about this idea of the pressures on at the moment for conserving materials and working more closely with the circular building sector to think of the current legislation from National Board of Housing, for instance, and also directives that Sweden has chosen to pursue really in things like waste hierarchy. So the idea of looking at the environmental code and how this totally circular economy might speak into that a little bit closer. So I think that's it. I'm really just open to questions and hope that I've set the ground for completely rethinking your idea of housing.
Thank you, Tanya. I would very much like to visit one of these moves. It's kind of engineering. It's a very interesting process, I think. I think most people here would like to see that in action out of curiosity.
It really is. And actually, just to say, I don't think I said this, what I've also been doing is documenting the methods. So these methods, the contractor uses amazing recycling systems. So he's used the same steels for the past 30 years. He's renewed some, but it's just a process of cutting the steels or welding bits on to extend to the size of building that he's using. So it is an amazing process. It's very resourceful and very innovative. So it seems like it's a historic model, but I think it's an innovation for housing. I'll let you know when the next one.
Are there any questions? I was wondering which Nina, do you have one? You're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
I'm interested in hearing if you looked into the what do you say,
municipalities.
Thank you. And regulations like in Stockholm or Gothenburg, where it's kind of dense. How do they look upon old buildings coming in? Do they see it like how do they perceive it? Like it's a new building, it's an old building when you look into the planning of it.
I think the contractor deals with all the processes of the permissions that are required. I've seen buildings go the other way in Umeå, where a historic building was taken out of the city. But one of the examples that I showed on here, we'll just go back to it. Actually, maybe it's not in this section, but he has moved a number in Stockholm. So it's been agreed, and it's about whether there's enough space to move it, the times that you can move it, and of course the planning regulations that apply there. So it does depend on the housing construction type, and then upgrading the interior to the Kmart standards, of course.
Yeah.
So there was some disappointment. So it's easier for me to talk about Umeå just because that's where I've been located, but just trying to find the one in Umeå now. This building, the head of the School of Architecture wanted to buy this. It was one of those krona houses that were available, and it was quite difficult to negotiate. The commune were very clear that they just wanted to apply the circular economy and take aspects of the building. So I think they took very little in the end from this, I think is a beautiful house. And it was on a site, it was on a commune-owned site or municipality-owned site that was part of a school development. So I think it could have been accommodated, and in other ways, I think it could have been accommodated around the building, but also it could have easily been adapted to somewhere else in the city, I think. So there is a possibility, I think, of local moves that could be brought to bear on it. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, thank you.
Who is the typical client of these moves, Tanya?
I think there's no typical client. That's what I've come to understand. I think it's people who, I think there are reasons that people want to move. I made some assumptions myself. So when I first came into Umeå and I saw this house lifted up, and I was hearing about the house was moving out of the city, I made the wrong assumption that it would be a developer who was trying to make money from the site and extract as much money from that previous site as possible. But I found out actually that the house belonged to somebody who was a teacher of history. It belonged to his father and his grandfather, and he was very passionate about preserving the house. And he'd seen the possibility to conserve this house because he, the upkeep of the house was quite high for him. So to move it actually meant that he would have the money to do that. So that was an interesting proposal. And the same with the house that was moved in Strixley. It is a woman who just fell in love with the house. She understood there was a problem with this swamp in the basement, and what could she do about it? So it was lateral thinking, literally. That she would.
Have you seen any developing companies using this technique to create new projects?
Well, if LKAB are come under that remit, LKAB were the ones who moved the houses, the really heavy houses, the eight houses that were 300 tons. So they belong to LKAB. And I think I don't know, they're not housing developers as such, but clearly, their idea of moving these houses was key to that. And actually, there's a backstory to that, which is that they first asked this house mover about moving the church in Kiruna many years ago, and he said that it was possible. So I think that was the generator for this recent move. And listening to his understanding of that move, he wouldn't have moved it in that way. I think that was a very expensive move. So the cost of the road, I think, was 27 million or something like that.
500 million crowns.
Okay.
Cost.
Okay.
Because they also invested in infrastructure.
When I talked to him about that, he said that he wouldn't have moved it in the summer. He would have moved it in the winter and built a snow road. And I've seen that practice happening. So it seems very sustainable. A lot less costly. The evidence of it would just melt away. So I think there's something interesting in that as well.
Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe how can we find these houses then? We are a developer. Where are they? I mean, Kiruna is well known, but otherwise.
You had a map there in the beginning, Tanya. You had a map with the houses.
Yeah, those are the houses that have moved.
Okay.
I'm not sure where that map is. Here it is. I have a much more detailed map, so it's a digital map to show where the houses have moved. And that was one idea. We were trying to understand which direction are they flowing in. Are they going from inland to the city? Are they coming out of the city? So we're plotting that at the moment. But we've also been working with students who've been working on projects looking at places like there's an area inland from Umeå, Dorotea, and places around there, which Wilhelmina is another place as well, which have lots of empty housing. So, that's another project separate to this, that we could identify empty homes and then think about how they might be relocated or redistributed. He also has, in plotting this, so we have this new document. I've got it in front of me here. This is the 400, you can see the thickness of it. This is the 400 plus document where we've started to look at each one of the projects, where it is, how far it's moved, and so on. And there is a section of housing in here which is still up in the air. So it's not come to ground anywhere. For different reasons, developers have run out of money, so it's still standing on the steel, waiting to be moved. So there are places that have moved, but still waiting as well. So
house
yes,
in standby.
Sorry?
A house in standby.
Yes, exactly.
We have a question here in the chat. Linus asks, are moved house subject to the same permit processes as a new construction?
No, they're not. This is also something that's very interesting, which is a house, a building is a building while it's rooted on the ground, but when it's in transit, it becomes a vehicle and therefore becomes subject to vehicle regulations. So the moment that the the signs are nailed onto the back for it to go on the road. They have different regulations. So I think that's another reason it's not really been documented. It comes somewhere between the idea of a vehicle and a building. New buildings need to be upgraded for sure. So if an existing structure is moved, it has to be upgraded to current contemporary insulation standards and so on. And that's also figured into the costing.
And
So
accessibility as well, right? Because then we have to be able to reach it in a wheelchair and such.
Exactly. We've just witnessed one moving from Carlix, and that's exactly it. So it's moved to a site which now is having a new ramp installed at the front of the house and so on. And this house, it's quite a contemporary building, so 1970s, 1980s, I think, has had multiple uses and moves already. It's moved from Torre to Carlix, from Carlix to Torre back again. It's been a refugee centre, a nursery, kindergarten, and a house before.
We need to end there. Thank you so much for presenting this. I will put this on YouTube and publish it on LinkedIn as well. We thank you for your work and all these upcoming ideas that we planted now, I think, how we could work in the future. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, very.
Thanks a lot.